الحمد لله وكفى والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا الشمس كورت وإذا النجوم انكدرت وإذا الجبال سيرت وإذا العشار عطلت وإذا الوحوش حشرت وإذا البحار سجرت سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. So inshallah ta'ala, today inshallah we will cover the tafseer of Surah Takwir. This surah was revealed in Makkah, and one of the interesting points about the surahs that were revealed in Makkah were that they generally discussed themes along the lines of the concept of Yawm al-Qiyamah, Day of Judgment, and resurrection. And the reason for this is because the kuffar and mushrikeen didn't believe in the idea of a resurrection. You know, oftentimes in the various parts of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes makes reference to the questions or the comments that the kuffar would make, when they would ask the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, look at this dead bone here, if I pick it up and I crush it, are you telling me that this is going to be resurrected? So they would ask incredulous questions to try and mock the idea that we will actually be resurrected, and the fact that there is going to even be a Day of Judgment. So a lot of the Meccan surahs will have sort of elements of these themes within them. In fact, it comes in a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever wants to see Qiyamah with his own eyes should read Surah Takwir, which is the surah that we are covering today. In another hadith, it mentions that Abu Bakr saw white hair and he said, you are becoming old. And the Prophet ﷺ replied that Surah Hud, Surah Waqiyah, Surah Mursalat, Surah Naba, and Surah Takwir has made me old. Meaning that there is so much difficulty and kind of worry in these surahs that because of this worry, the Prophet ﷺ was getting white hairs. So, as I mentioned, this surah tells us the description of the Day of Judgment. So we'll cover the first few ayat and then we'll go through some explanation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ, when the sun will be made dark. Kawwara basically means something that becomes dark or where it loses the light. And Ibn Abbas, in explaining this ayat, basically says that on the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make the sun, the moon and the stars fall in the oceans, and the fire of the sun will extinguish. Then Allah Ta'ala mentions وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ انْقَدَرَتْ, and when the stars will fall. In qadarat basically refers to the stars falling. So according to Tafseer, the sky looks like it will be raining stars. And then وَإِذَا الْجِبَالُ سُيِّرَتْ, and when the mountains will be moved. So here it means that the earth is going to lose its gravity, and even the mountains will become weightless, and they will look like cotton balls flying in the air. Again, very similar. If you remember Surah Naba that we did last week, where we mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made the mountains as pegs, and now in this surah you can see that actually now because of the Day of Judgment, they are now being made to be weightless and will be floating in the air, just like you see cotton that might be floating in the wind. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ, and when the Ishar, the 10-month pregnant camel, will be freed. Now this is a very interesting description that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used here. The word Ishar comes from the word Ashara, which in Arabic means the number 10. And in Arabic it refers to the female camel which is at full term pregnancy, i.e. 10 months pregnant. Now, you have to remember that in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, obviously there was no fancy cars and these type of things. So things like this camel that's at the full term of its pregnancy, this was like viewed as a huge investment and something of great value. Now, since this was like a very precious property for the Arabs, it was a very expensive investment. And it wasn't necessarily just the value of the camel, but the fact that the baby will also be counted as part of that investment. So this is basically telling us that on that day, the Day of Judgment, no one is going to look after even their most treasured possessions. That is going to be the state of a person, that they'll be so worried. And it will be like leaving essentially any valuable asset that you've got open for anybody's taking. If you picture it this way, imagine you had a Lamborghini or a Ferrari and you left the door wide open, key in the ignition, the engine running, and then you ran off or went away somewhere. That car is then easy taking for anybody. So it's like that sort of scenario here. So even the most precious, prized thing that the Arabs have, that will be just left and abandoned. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَإِذَا الْوُحُوشُ حُشِرَتْ, and when the wild animals will be gathered. So scholars have written that because of the Day of Judgment, even the jungles will be aware, and even the animals will be running for their lives. They will not care what animals are around them and the animals that will be together. They will come out of their hiding places. And another opinion on this is that the wild animals will come out into the cities. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَإِذَا الْبِحَارُ سُجِّرَتْ, and when the oceans overflow. Sujjirat basically means to boil and bubble. So here Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu mentions that the oceans will be boiling because of the sun falling into it. And according to another tafsir, it means that all the oceans of the world will mix and flow into each other. Now they can only do this if they are in a state of being overflowing. And also mentions, according to tafsir of Hassan Basri rahmatullah alayh and Qatada rahmatullah alayh, they say that the oceans are going to evaporate because of their boiling away, and they will boil and essentially dry out. Now it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to take any one of those opinions. It could actually be that all of these different sort of opinions happen at different stages. So first you've got the trumpet that will be blown, and then everything will be destroyed, as we mentioned in the previous surahs that we've covered. And it comes in another explanation that during the first trumpet, 6 major things are going to happen. 1, you're going to get people will be in marketplaces shopping, and all of a sudden the sun will go dark. At the same time, people will witness the mountains flying in the air. Then you'll have the earthquake occurring and the earth will start shaking. Then humans and jinns will all get scared and will start running frantically. And then it mentions that jinns will actually dive into the oceans, seeking probably some protection or refuge. And then there will be a strong wind and every single being on earth will die. So this is kind of one narration that's been mentioned. Alhamdulillah. And then in the next verse, Allah Ta'ala mentions, وَإِذَا النُّفُوسُ زُوِّجَتْ, and when the nufus, when the souls will be paired. Zuwijat basically means to pair up. That's why a husband is often called a zawj and a wife zawjati or zawja. And what is the pairing being referred to here? So one is that it's the pairing of the body and the souls. The souls will re-enter the body again. Another mention is that one type of people on that day will be grouped together. So you're going to have people like pious people in one group. You might have people who are liars and sinners in another group. People who are immodest or indecent will be in another group. Those who pray their salah on time in one group, etc. So there'll be different categories of people grouped together. And then another point that's mentioned is that people will be paired up with their book of deeds. Now, it can, again, as I said, it can be all 3 different explanations in the same occurrence. It doesn't mean that it has to be any one of them. And then this will all happen at the second trumpet. Then Allah Ta'ala mentions, وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ, and when the maw'udah will be questioned, the female child that was buried alive. And then Allah Ta'ala mentions, بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ, so for which sin were you killed, or was she killed? So obviously an innocent child is an innocent child, and this was like a person that would be free of any sin. So Allah Ta'ala will be asking her, for what sin were you killed? What was your fault? Now, in reality, it is something that was done by the parents, that they buried her alive. So you might ask the question, well, why is she being asked? I mean, she was a child. So ulama say that there's a number of different reasons why that could be the case. So one is that because she is oppressed in dunya and she could not defend herself, and being buried at such a young age, Allah Ta'ala will give her the chance to speak up against her parents. Another reason could be that because of the honor or fear of the parents, she will not say anything about her parents. So to give her that prompt to speak against her parents, she is being questioned. And another opinion is that Allah Ta'ala will be so angry with the parents for what they did that He would not want to speak to them, and because of this, Allah Ta'ala will talk to her rather than to them about this whole incident. Now, obviously we all know that burying children is an abhorrent, despicable act, and this was something that was done in the pre-Islamic era, in the era of the Jahiliyyah time, that people would bury their daughters alive. Now, some ulama say that the rulings of abortion are based on this sort of scenario. So the hukum is that it's the same as almost killing your child. So how do we know this? Well, if you kill somebody, you have qisas. So this is a bit of fiqhi sort of masalas here. And then blood money can be demanded, or punishment of the qisas is given, and diyat, compensation. So now, if a pregnant woman is hit in the womb and she loses the child, there is blood money due. This means that there is the same ruling for killing an individual as well. And the sin of the same is the same. So if abortion is done after 4 months, that is also considered as like a killing, because that's when the ruh is blown into the child, into the baby. So even if before 4 months it's aborted, it is still considered a sin, but just that it's more grave if it's done after. So that's just a little bit of a flavor for the fiqhi aspect of this. Now, the next ayat then basically mentions number 10 is وَإِذَا الصُّحُفُ نُشِرَتْ. So when the scripts will be unrolled. So the scripts here basically refers to when the book of deeds are given and they're opened out. And then Allah Ta'ala mentions وَإِذَا السَّمَاءُ كُشِطَتْ, that when the sky will be wrapped up. So scholars basically interpret this in two different types of meanings. After the first trumpet is blown, it is wrapped up and then unwrapped at the second blowing of the trumpet. Or it is when the angels come down from the sky and when the accountability, the hisab, is going to start. It's going to look like there are steps in the sky from which the angels are coming down. So there's two different meanings of that. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions وَإِذَا الْجَحِيمُ سُعِّرَتْ, and when the hellfire will be ignited. So subhanallah, even at that stage the fire of Jahannam will be lit. وَإِذَا الْجَنَّةُ أُزْلِفَتْ, and Jannah will be brought near, meaning that it's going to be presented to those whose book of deeds is in their right hand, i.e. the pious people, the righteous people, and it will be near, so they won't have to walk very far. And then Allah Ta'ala mentions alimat nafsun ma ahdarat, that then the soul will know what it brought forward. So everybody will know what their consequences are going to be that day, and now the accountability has been done, the decision has been made, and they will know where they are going to go. So this is why, if you can imagine, with the scenario so far, why it was hard on the Prophet ﷺ, because of the scenes that are so vivid and difficult. And if you imagine Prophet ﷺ, his concern is for his ummah. Constantly throughout his life, you can see that there's that fiqr, there's that worry, there's that concern for the state of his ummah, even to the point where he was on his deathbed about to depart the dunya, and he was again asking about his ummah. So it's not hard to see why this was very, very difficult on the Prophet ﷺ. So now the scene changes slightly, and Allah Ta'ala then takes an oath. Now remember, whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath, it means that Allah Ta'ala is drawing our attention to something very important that He wants to highlight and emphasize. So in verse 15, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِالْخُنَّسِ. So Allah ta'ala says, I take an oath with the one who comes from the back. So scholars say it is referring to the constellation of the stars that is called Khamsa Mutakhayyara, which basically means there's 5 stars, and it could also include the meaning of the planets, because in those days they would call planets and stars the same. So Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, they do not appear in the same place all throughout the seasons. Their positions do change, and they are essentially the 5 wandering stars. So this is one of the meanings given to that. So Allah Ta'ala takes an oath of these planets because it is a big sign of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala that they appear in different places in the horizon. Then following that, Allah Ta'ala mentions Al-Jawaril Kunnas, that the moving one, Jawar, and the hiding one, Kunnas. And then Allah Ta'ala mentions وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا عَسْأَسْ, which basically means and by the night. And Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is taking an oath here again, meaning that when it spreads, the darkness spreads and it's deep in the night. So you can imagine like what the night appears like if you get up before dawn, just before dawn, like say tahajjud time, and if you look outside in that kind of level of darkness and depth of the night. And then Allah Ta'ala mentions وَالصُّبْحِ إِذَا تَنَفَّسْ, and the morning when it breathes, at Fajr time when everything is coming back to life, and you hear the sort of sounds of the morning, the birds coming up, etc. And then Allah Ta'ala mentions إِنَّهُ لَقَوْلُ رَسُولٍ كَرِيمٍ. So now Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is going to basically elaborate on the angel of Jibreel alayhi salam who brings the wahi. So he's basically trying to prove the authenticity of Hazrat Jibreel alayhi salam, who brings the messages, the wahi, to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So Allah Ta'ala mentions in verse 19, إِنَّهُ لَقَوْلُ رَسُولٍ كَرِيمٍ, indeed it is surely the speech of a noble messenger. Then ذِي قُوَّةٍ عِنْدَ ذِي الْعَرْشِ الْمَكِينِ مُطَاعٍ ثَمَّ أَمِينٍ. So powerful, near the owner of the throne, the one who has a place, and the one who is obeyed here, the trustworthy one. Now the majority of ulama say that it is about Jibreel alayhi salam that's being referred to in these verses, and not about the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So Jibreel alayhi salam actually has these specific qualities. So Allah Ta'ala is telling us that He is only conveying the message, and He is noble and respected, and He is very powerful. Meaning that if a jinn was to come and try and mix anything with the Quran through the process of revelation, then Jibreel alayhi salam would be more powerful than him. In other words, basically it wouldn't happen. There was no possibility of anything happening. And Jibreel alayhi salam has also been mentioned that he has 600 wings, and it's told that the nation of Lut alayhi salam had 4 towns. So this is just to give you an example of his power, so to speak. And so Lut alayhi salam had 4 towns, and every town had 4 million people. And Jibreel alayhi salam flipped it over with just one tip of his wing, just one. And he flipped over the whole 4 towns. The nation of Thamud was destroyed by a scream of Jibreel alayhi salam. So this kind of gives you an indication of his power. It also mentions in Sahih Muslim that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to the angels in the heavens, they all start trembling with fear. So Allah Ta'ala is mentioning His power, so we know that no one can make any changes to the message and no one can overtake Him. It also mentions that He is so honored that He has a place in the closeness of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. So He is getting a message from a close place, and there's no way that He is going to not get the right message. And also it mentions that He is obeyed, meaning that because He is the leader of the angels, one of the signs of the proof of this is that when the Prophet ﷺ went to Mi'raj, Jibreel alayhi salam took him to each heaven. Now, so it comes in a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ that he said that in the sky I have 2 helpers, Jibreel and Mikael, and in the ground I have 2 helpers, Abu Bakr and Umar. Then it was also known, another name that's known to Jibreel alayhi salam, or he is referred to by this name, is called Amin. So Allah Ta'ala gives him an amana, yani the Quran, the revelation, the wahi, and then he will not obviously break this trust at all. So one of the nicknames of Jibreel is Jibreel Amin. Now the next verse, Allah Ta'ala mentions وَمَا صَاحِبُكُمْ بِمَجْنُونَ, and your partner is not insane. And this is referring to the accusations made by the Quraysh or the Makkans about the Prophet ﷺ that he is a madman. Na'udhu billah. Then Allah Ta'ala mentions وَلَقَدْ رَآهُ بِالْأُفُقِ الْمُبِينِ, surely he saw him in the clear horizon. Now this is referring to, according to the majority, of the incident of the Prophet ﷺ seeing Jibreel alayhi salam in the horizon, and he saw his angelic form with his own eyes. Now it comes in a hadith by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu that the Prophet ﷺ asked Jibreel alayhi salam that I want to see you in your real form, because every time he would come to the Prophet ﷺ, he would typically come in human form, and he obviously wanted to see the Prophet. The Prophet ﷺ wanted to see him in his real form, and Jibreel alayhi salam said that you won't be able to because I'm too big. So Prophet ﷺ mentioned a few places where maybe if they go there and he'll be able to see him properly, and Jibreel said to him each time that I'm too big. Then the Prophet ﷺ said Hira, the cave of Hira, around that area, and so he appeared there, and the Prophet ﷺ was obviously overwhelmed at seeing him. Now it mentions that he saw him twice, once at Hira and once in Mi'raj, and others mention that he may have seen him more than twice. But the majority opinion, there is a minority opinion that this means that Prophet ﷺ saw Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the incident of the Mi'raj, because he did cross a boundary by which no one else could go beyond. But in reality, we don't know what happened there, so we can't say what we don't know. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions وَمَا هُوَ عَلَى الْغَيْبِ بِضَنِينَ, that he is not on the unseen stingy, meaning that he will tell you and he will not keep it to himself, and he wants to give out to others what he has seen. In other words, he will give every revelation that he's getting, and he's not going to hide anything from you. And then Allah Ta'ala mentions وَمَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ, and this is not the speech of the rejected shaitan. And then Allah Ta'ala says, 26, فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ, so where are you going? Meaning, why are you astray? Why aren't you following the path? Allah Ta'ala proves the Quran is 100% authentic. He even gives the qualities of Jibreel alayhi salam and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he affirms that it's not from shaitan, so why are you not following it? He's given so much evidences to kind of assure people, then there's no reason for them not to follow it now that they have these reassurances. So if they're still not doing it, then there's obviously some issue with that person's own mindset or understanding, or his own intention perhaps. So then Allah Ta'ala mentions in huwa illa dhikrul lil alamin, that is, it is not but a reminder for the worlds. It's for all time, this message, i.e. the Quran. And then liman sha'a minkum an yastaqim, that for whoever wishes from you that he walks on the straight path. وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ, and you cannot wish until Allah, the Lord of the worlds, wishes. So there's essentially two types of aqidah being mentioned here that was wrong amongst the Arabs, that whatever they wish they could have. So Allah Ta'ala is negating that. So that was one aqidah issue that they had. So they believe whatever they wanted they would get. So Allah Ta'ala here is telling them that that's not the case. And another group would say that Allah Ta'ala is writing everything, we are not in control then, essentially. So if Allah Ta'ala has already decreed everything, we have no control. So, we can't do anything about it. Well, the reality is Allah Ta'ala is telling them that no, you do have the power to decide. So Allah Ta'ala is saying that you should make intention for the straight path, and then you have to make dua for it, and then Allah Ta'ala, if He grants it, He grants it. So this inshallah concludes the tafseer of Surah Takwir. So inshallah Ta'ala from tomorrow we'll move on to Surah Al-Infitar. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our coming together to read about the Quran and understand the Quran. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to be the people who receive the book of deeds on their right hand and be granted Jannah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reunite us in Jannah, inshaAllah. And may Allah ta'ala allow us to maximize our time in this blessed month of Ramadan and take full benefit of it. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillah.